Jonas had never expected to be called a hero, let alone a husband, before breakfast. One moment he was sipping synthetic coffee in his tiny Earth apartment, mentally rehearsing how to politely refuse another invitation to a neighborhood drone racing competition, and the next, a flash of iridescent light swallowed him, depositing him on the polished floor of the Galactic Diplomatic Pavilion. The air shimmered faintly, like a heat haze on a summer highway, but the heat was non-existent, replaced by the faint scent of something that smelled like roasted metal and orchids, a combination Jonas could neither identify nor admit to liking. Before him stood a line of women, each more dazzlingly alien than the last. Robes that glimmered with colors he didn't have names for rippled around them, and every so often, a strand of hair lifted and hovered as if gravity had forgotten that it existed. Jonas blinked at one woman whose eyes shifted from sapphire to molten gold with every subtle blink. He cleared his throat because apparently, clearing one's throat in the middle of intergalactic proceedings was a thing. Hello? He offered, as if he were greeting a particularly fancy supermarket clerk. The coordinator, a multi-limbed creature with a voice like a chorus of low bells, handed him a scroll. Jonas stared at it, squinting. "You choose a bride," the creature said. "Random selection acceptable." Jonas stared at the lineup, then back at the scroll, then back at the lineup. His brain did a full loop of panic and logic. Asterisk, I don't know any of these people. I barely know my cat. Random seems safe. Asterisk, so he did what any sane human confronted with cosmic absurdity would do. He pointed. 1, 2, 3, for his finger landed. Lyra. She seemed almost human, with soft curves and delicate hands, but her long ears, elegantly tapered and faintly glowing at the tips, twitched slightly, like antennae picking up amusement. Her eyes, a deep violet, narrowed at him with a sparkle that was half judgment, half curiosity. Jonas noticed, entirely too late, that his hand had been shaking. He cleared his throat again. Hi? I guess we're married now." Lyra raised an eyebrow, or whatever the alien equivalent was, and smiled. "Random, you say? How brave." Her voice had a musical lilt, a tone that made Jonas feel simultaneously like a fool and like the luckiest man in the galaxy. The ceremony began, though ceremony was generous. Jonas tried to follow gestures, not quite aware of when to bow or hover, tripping over a floating ceremonial ribbon that slithered around his ankles like a pet. Lyra didn't intervene, only smiled faintly and whispered, "You amuse me, human." He nearly choked on the words because, for once, he had no idea what to say back. By the end, Jonas had almost mastered the art of standing upright without knocking over alien statuary, and Lyra's long ears had twitched in laughter more than once at his clumsiness. Somewhere deep inside, Jonas realized that whatever interstellar chaos awaited him, it might just be a little easier with her by his side, or at least a lot funnier. Jonas quickly discovered that living on Lyra's world was like trying to juggle flaming meteors while riding a hoverboard blindfolded. Every day was a new challenge in alien etiquette, interspersed with bizarre technological marvels that made his brain feel like it had been put through a cosmic blender. Doors opened with thought, cups of tea floated and refilled themselves at will, and utensils occasionally darted off the table, chasing each other like tiny metallic fish. Jonas spent a solid hour chasing a hovering spoon, apologizing profusely to a dignitary whose patience had long since evaporated, while Lyra watched, her long ears flicking with amusement. "You might survive the politics, Jonas," she said, her voice lilting like wind over crystal towers. "But you may never conquer the silverware." Breakfasts were particularly perilous. Jonas had tried to eat a dish that moved as if it had a mind of its own, and ended up wearing a combination of fruit compote and a sauce that shimmered like liquid mercury. Lyra handed him a napkin with an expression that suggested she was struggling not to laugh, and he muttered, "I swear this is what they mean by intergalactic culture shock." The palace, or whatever one called a structure the size of 3 moons stacked together, was alive with peculiarities. Staircases curved and floated, taking Jonas up in gentle spirals, and hallways shifted subtly, as if the building itself was aware of its inhabitants. The court was a mix of formality and chaos. Emissaries from worlds Jonas had never heard of debated policies using holographic chess pieces that argued with each other, while hovering drones corrected everyone's posture and pronunciation. Jonas tried to keep up, though his clumsiness earned him more than a few sympathetic chuckles and one very dramatic swoosh of an offending robe. Amid all the comedy and confusion, Jonas began noticing things about Lyra. Her long ears flicked subtly at each conversation, and she listened in a way that made the room feel smaller, the arguments less intimidating. She could command attention with a glance, and yet she often allowed him to stumble through meetings without scolding, merely offering quiet guidance or a raised brow that seemed to say, "You're hopeless, but lovable." Jonas had never met someone so poised and yet so unshakably amused by the absurdities of life. One afternoon, during a levitating tea ceremony, Jonas accidentally spilled a cup, sending liquid in slow-motion arcs across the floor. Lyra's long ears twitched, and she gave him that look again, the one that made his knees wobble, and not entirely from fear. "You're going to get used to this," she said, voice teasing. "Or we're going to have to hire a human containment field just for you." Jonas laughed, wiping the tea from his robes and nearly tipping over in the zero-gravity shift of the room. Somehow, even amidst political intrigue, floating tea, and interstellar customs that could drive a sane man mad, he felt a strange comfort. With Lyra's quiet amusement and unexpected patience, the galaxy didn't feel so overwhelming. It just felt alive and maybe, just maybe, a little less lonely. The banquet hall shimmered like a captured nebula, every surface reflecting the soft glow of hovering lights and holographic banners that rippled gently in the artificial breeze. Jonas, dressed in a suit that tried, and mostly failed, to keep up with alien fashion, felt like a moth dropped into a supernova. He had spent weeks learning to navigate this world without permanently offending anyone, or getting himself ejected into space, and now, apparently, his final test was happening. Lyra moved beside him with effortless grace, her long ears subtly vibrating as though sensing the tension in the room. Jonas, in contrast, felt a low-level hum of panic buzzing in his chest. The banquet was meant to honor all the newly formed unions between delegates and their chosen partners. Yet the moment the ceremonial holograms flickered to life, Jonas froze. One of them projected an intricate crest, gleaming with symbols Jonas could not decipher, and the room went silent. Whispers rippled like waves across the gathered dignitaries. Jonas realized, with a sudden clarity that nearly made him spill his floating drink, that Lyra's status was not just royal. It was princess-level political thunder. "Oh," Jonas said, voice too loud, too human, and entirely inappropriate. "So that's why everyone kept staring at you." He winced. Lyra's long ears twitched in the faintest of smirks. "You could say your random choice has consequences," she replied, eyes glittering with amusement. The revelation sparked a flurry of diplomatic maneuvering. Ambassadors whispered behind levitating tablets, advisors hurried past on hover platforms, and drones zipped through the hall correcting minor protocol breaches. Jonas felt a hand squeeze his, grounding him, and realized Lyra was subtly guiding him, letting him navigate the storm with a mix of patience and quiet humor. When a particularly officious ambassador cornered him with questions about interplanetary trade, Jonas blurted a joke about guessing the royal lottery, causing a ripple of laughter that, against all odds, defused the tension. Lyra laughed too, a sound like bells dancing in a breeze, and the ice began to break. By the end of the evening, the political chaos had settled into a fragile equilibrium. Jonas had discovered that while he had been clumsy, awkward, and hopelessly human, his honesty and humor had unexpectedly smoothed relations that centuries of diplomacy might have complicated. He realized that he had changed, not by mastering alien customs perfectly, but by learning to embrace the absurdity, the beauty, and the unpredictability of life on Lyra's world. Later, alone in a chamber overlooking a city of floating lights and swirling towers, Jonas looked at Lyra. Her long ears flicked once, then twice, and she smiled. "So," she said, "do you think you'll survive married life with a princess?" Jonas grinned, brushing a hand through his disheveled hair. "If I can survive this banquet, I think I can survive anything, as long as you keep laughing at me. Her laugh echoed, soft and melodic, carrying a promise of partnership, mischief, and the unpredictable joy of a life shared across worlds. Jonas understood then that randomness had led him here, to a universe more vast, strange, and funny than he had ever imagined, and somehow it was exactly where he belonged.